Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for our first show. And we are delighted. Pam and I have worked together for, I hate to say, almost 20 years.
Oh my
That didn't even
gosh.
want to roll out of my mouth. But you will find, I think, today that this show and all shows moving forward, we are passionate about this topic. We are passionate about helping the people who are going through it, who are either caregivers themselves or experiencing these cognitive issues. So we are serious, but we're not formal because we truly believe that part of what everybody needs who's going through this is relief, is laughter, is a sense of community. So you know you're not alone. So throughout today's session and those moving forward, we are going to cover some topics that are very serious and that get to the heart of all of us when we talk about it. But please know we're here to relieve your stress by giving you education, giving you a support system, and hopefully when you leave these shows, you have a sense of calm. I think that is our goal, and you know where you can reach out for help. I am merely the moderator. I have experience and I have education, but all of it flows from Pam. She is the person who knows the roadmap. She is the person who can give wonderful, meaningful advice. And she is the person who we are going to look to as our guiding star as we do this. So welcome. I'm going to take all of your questions through the chat feature. I know Pam's going to cover a lot, so I'll track them. And if we don't cover your question through the presentation, we will get back to it at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over at this point to Pam Atwood, who we are lucky to have her here. So Pam,
Oh, thanks,
please.
Matt. You're so sweet. Thank you so much for saying all of that. I do want to request, Madeline, if you can adjust your camera because you're looking a little like Wilson from, if you can just tip it a little bit. There we go. Now we can.
Oh, now I don't get the top of my, see the things we're going to talk about?
Okay,
There we
there
go.
you go. Wonderful. Technology is a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
So again, thank you, Madeline, for the partnership here. Heber Senior Care is an organization that I'm very passionate about. Full disclosure, I do sit on the board of directors. So after all of those years of envying Madeline's VP title, I'm now her boss. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. She knows I'm kidding.
Wow, we're going to talk about
I call her all the time and say,
control.
when is our meeting? When is our meeting? Do we have a meeting? I'm like such not a normal board member, but I'm really passionate about both the work I do, the work that Madeline and Heber Senior Care does, and obviously about this topic. So personally, my grandmother died of Alzheimer's. We were her caregiver for 9 of the 12 years she had the disease. I've also been a professional working in the field of gerontology for about 30 years now. Oh, I can't believe it's actually probably even more than that. 1990 is when I graduated. So yeah, it's okay. 32 years. And for those of you, yeah, there you go. For those of you who are just joining us, I have no air conditioning. So apologies if you see me getting an occasional brow or upper lip or whatever. If it looks like I'm melting, that's why. All right, but Madeline, why don't we just jump in and get going here? Let me see if I can remember which way to do this. There we go. I'll just do that.
There we go.
All right. So when we talk today about, and in our future sessions about Alzheimer's and cognitive disorders, there are a couple of things, a couple of terms that I just wanted to clarify first. So all of this is a memory issue. And while memory is most commonly what everybody thinks of, it's only one of many different symptoms that are under the umbrella of dementia. So to be diagnosed with now what they call a major neurocognitive disorder, you have to have memory problems plus one other cognitive issue. So that could be things like processing or word finding difficulties or confusion and disorientation. So there are lots of different symptoms that fall under that umbrella that we call dementia. Dementia is just a term that means a loss of intellectual functions. And dementia is one symptom of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. There are also other conditions, anything from alcoholism to, MS, or things like vascular disease, Lewy body disease. There are other causes that are primary causes of dementia. So Alzheimer's, vascular Lewy body, frontotemporal dementia, those are the most common causes of dementia. But then there are those other causes of dementia as well that we don't necessarily associate with alcoholism or MS or, any number of other conditions. So, but dementia is the term. I will use dementia, Alzheimer's fairly interchangeably, and I'll try to clarify when I'm meaning specifically Alzheimer's versus another disease. So, Madelene, refresh my memory. Where
Yeah.
are we in our plan?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm here. So Pam, let's first talk about what are the symptoms other than memory loss. What other changes would someone notice possibly, and what changes go under the radar that are equally as important and obvious as I can't remember what my keys do?
Yeah. And that's something that's really important. We all have what we call senior moments, right? I always say to people, my memory's lousy. And it's not that I have a memory problem. I just remember late. So if you are like me and you remember late, like, oh my gosh, what was it that I was supposed to order today from Amazon, Peapod, whatever, or whatever grocery service. I suppose now it's the webinar, we should be branded in our communications. But I think that remembering late is a normal part of aging. Having a significant memory disorder is not a normal part of aging. Memory symptoms can include things like, for families, things you used to be able to do that you can't do anymore. So if your spouse, your loved one, your aunt, your uncle, whoever we're talking about, your parent, obviously, can't balance their checkbook. Now, my kids, if they look at me, mommy never balances the checkbook. That's just not mommy's strength. Mommy would rather just adjust for a penny here or there and call it to balance. That's just the way I am. And I know Tom Wright is rolling his eyes at that and cringing, and other financial folks out there on the web. That's just me. So that was never a strength of mine. If I can't remember phone numbers, that's huge because mommy always remembers phone numbers. Even
Can I
now that
interrupt you?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because frequently we see people who are dealing with their parents or dealing with a spouse. So should they be in healthy times remembering and writing down what the profile of the loved one you're dealing with later is? What if you
Great
don't?
question.
What if you don't remember?
That's such a great question. I'm going to tell you, no, you don't have to make a profile, but trust your gut. If
Okay.
you suspect something's going on, something's different, something's wrong, then it probably is. And if you start to talk to someone like a dementia coach or a dementia specialist, they may then say, how is he doing with paying the bills? How's she doing with getting lost while driving? How's she doing with remembering people's names or events? A part of something is not something like, so if you forget a part of something, that's not a big deal. If you forget the whole event, you really don't remember it, that's when you want to get worried.
Okay.
That said, there are lots of things that can cause those symptoms that are treatable. And that's one of the most important things to remember, is to rule out everything else that could be causing those memory changes. B12 deficiencies, thyroid disorders, sensitivity or missing of medications, non-compliance with medications, all kinds of different things that you wouldn't think of can trigger a memory problem or provide symptoms that look like Alzheimer's, including depression. And depression is very treatable, but depression causes what we call a pseudo dementia. It looks just like Alzheimer's sometimes, but it's part of depression.
Do you need a specialist? I mean, some of the things you're talking about, Pam, if you go to your general doctor, they don't have the experience. They're not seeing a population. And so talk about, who do you go to? Who do you open up to? Who do you talk to? Who do you trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I was laughing because my dad is, oh my gosh, how old is dad now? 77. And he went to his primary care physician this year for his annual Medicare wellness checkup. Now, by law, doctors are now supposed to ask about memory and screen for memory problems on the
Really?
annual checkup.
Oh,
Yes. So I called my dad and I said, make sure you listen for a memory screen because I want to know if Dr. R is doing that.
mhm.
And sure enough, I asked dad afterwards, and I have no worries about dad's memory right now, but the Alzheimer's in our family runs on his side of the family. He said, yeah, he asked me if I had any problems with my memory. I said, what did you say? I said, no. And I said, so what did then Dr. R do? And he said, nothing. We moved on. And I'm like, oh, that is so not what they're supposed to do. But that's okay. That's, more opportunity for further educating even who the people who we think are really good in this field. And it could just be a time management issue. He's known dad for a while. If dad says no, maybe not. But normally I would say start with your primary care physician or what we call your PCP. However, that may or may not be if let me back up and say a lot of times I talk to spousal caregivers or adult children, and they'll say, well, he was just at the doctor, but they didn't say anything or do anything. 55%, I think it was, the Alzheimer's Association did some research a couple of years ago. 55% of people diagnosed with dementia report that their doctor never told them. That's a scary statistic. That means
Didn't
it's
tell
going
them
in the
because
chart.
so they knew it.
They knew it somewhere along the line, it got noted, but the patient themselves was never told. Now, we are talking about a memory problem. It's entirely possible the person was told and they forgot, but
Mhm,
probably not, because in the early stages, people usually know. They may be in denial, but
mhm.
having a conversation about a memory disorder shouldn't necessarily be done just with the patient. This is a team sport.
Fair enough.
So question was about specialists. Do you have to go to a
Mhm.
neurologist? Many, many times primary care physicians will, once they've identified a neurocognitive disorder, they will then send someone for a neurology or geriatric psychology consult. They need to start with doing lab work to rule out all of those other things, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid disorders, what have you. And then that referral to the specialist can be made. When they go via neurology, what they're thinking is that this could be vascular. This could be strokes or mini strokes. And the neurologist will do the imaging. And whether it's a CAT scan or a PET scan, it cannot conclusively diagnose Alzheimer's yet or other kinds of dementia, but it can show us evidence of what they call white matter or gray matter changes. So they may just want a baseline, or they may say, yeah, we want to do some imaging and see if there's any evidence of white matter changes. What that then tells us is that it could be something like vascular dementia. If there's no real evidence, then it may be Alzheimer's type dementia. But a lot of times what they're doing is what we call a diagnosis of exclusion. They're trying to rule out other things that might be causing this. It may also include ruling out things like a tumor, or if they send the patient for a lumbar puncture, they're looking for normal pressure hydrocephalus, other kinds of rare disorders. So it's important to follow up with the neurologist, but the neurologist is not going to be the person who follows the patient through the progression of the disease. Neurologists are very specialized. A lot of times clients go to these appointments and they come out very frustrated because they didn't learn anything. They didn't get a diagnosis. They still don't know where to go. So again, you can bring them back here to either one of our websites, because this conversation will be on our websites, so they can start getting information here. But a neurologist most of the time is going to do some imaging and say, here's what we found, here's what we think, we'll see you in 6 months. Same thing with a geriatric psychiatrist. Here's what we tested you for, here's what it is or isn't, and we want to see you in 6 months. Now, a geriatric psychiatrist would probably be your first line of defense if we were thinking depression versus dementia. So again, they might start you on a pill. I personally think there is nothing worse, and this is the only disease that I know of where we do it, than being told, here's a pill, go home and wait to get worse. That's not medicine. That's not good medicine or good treatment. So I'm very passionate about, and we'll cover in future episodes, what else can we do to help you fight back?
Perfect.
You need to stop me, Matt, because you know me. I can
No, no,
keep
no.
going
Well,
on.
and no one's chatting to me to say, will you
Okay.
please tell her to stop?
Or to slow down. If I'm
Or to
going too
slow down.
quickly, feel free to let us know.
Please do. What are some of the other causes of memory problems? What else can trigger
Yeah.
this?
Okay, so some of the other causes, like I said, they can be external things like damage, smoking. Not that smoking necessarily causes dementia, but smoking kills brain cells. When the dementing process happens, we in the early stages use what we call compensatory strategies. We find different routes. Like if I can't find the right word that I'm looking for, my brain goes through the big card catalog in my head. And I can only say this to this group because younger people don't know what a card catalog is. I'll go through the big Google in my head, right? And search for a different word. If we have fewer brain cells to process all of those changes, it's harder for our brains to compensate. So using substances, especially smoking, those are real big brain cell killers.
Is that why they say exercise? I mean, lately, I think
Mhm.
there was an article in the New York Times this week
This
that
week.
talked about exercise.
Yep,
It doesn't say prevents, but
correct.
they're trying to suggest that it can help with it. Is that true?
Yep.
Or is it just the overall, if you exercise, you're just healthier, period?
Oh, good question. What they do know, and research at the Alzheimer's Association's International Conference in San Diego in July, early July. No, I didn't get to go. When I got to present, it was in Boston. I didn't even stay overnight. But this year's conference in San Diego did affirm and reaffirm some of what we suspected theoretically. What's good for your heart is good for your head. So all of the same things that reduce your cardiovascular disease risk, reduce your risk of getting neurocognitive disorders. And that includes especially exercise. The article that came out this week showed that even people with dementia, it may slow the progression of their disease. We don't even have medications that do that yet. The medications that we have do nothing to slow the progression of the disease. All they do is help the healthy cells communicate longer. That's really important information because if we can reduce our risk of getting a disease and slow the progression if we do get it, that's a really important piece of research. A lot of times people will say to me, oh, it's because I didn't eat enough blueberries. No, surely there are what do they call those? Antioxidants. Talk about word finding difficulties. All I could think of was antivirals, but that's not it. Antioxidants. So, but this is very theoretically based. So the theory is that there are free radicals going around damaging our brain and increasing our inflammation. That's theoretical, though, that is the cause or related to the cause of dementia. So if the free radical theory is true, antioxidants are important. However, not eating enough blueberries is not, eating blueberries is not going to prevent you from getting Alzheimer's.
But are you implying or suggesting that some of these things can help slow the progression of something that's genetic?
Great question.
I know I'm getting ahead of us a little bit.
That's
but
okay.
How can you influence your own genes?
That's great. So when I was working at Hebrew Healthcare, or it was Hebrew Healthcare back then, now it's Hebrew Senior Care.
It's okay.
Dr. Henry Schneiderman and I did some research and put together our 12, I think it was the top 12 risks of getting dementia. Of the top 12, 3 of them you can't do anything about, but the rest of them you can.
Oh, wow.
So genetically, if this runs in your family, we don't yet have a way to engineer the genes to prevent you from getting it. if you have a primary relative, either a parent or a sibling or a child sometimes with Down syndrome, we don't
Mm.
have a way to minimize your risk. Down syndrome, the trisomy 21, that third chromosome is one of the same, well, the chromosome, that gene is one of the same genes as young onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, interesting.
So they're very closely related. There are some theorists that believe that if they live long enough, 100% of people with Down syndrome will get Alzheimer's, young onset. As people with Downs are living longer, a significant proportion of that population is developing what we consider young onset dementia.
Mm.
And then the third thing that you really can't do anything about is a previous head injury. And that's because we're just now starting to get new information on how significant the risk of injury is to your brain relating to or possibly causing dementia later in life. And that's what they call chronic traumatic encephalopathy. They used to call it something else, pugilistic dementia. And it was a lot of boxers, fighters that had it. And now we're seeing, of course, the NFL, a lot of football players getting it. So.
Okay. We should probably, because I'm looking at the clock and I'm
Yep.
mindful. So we have covered is forgetfulness a normal part of aging. And I
No,
think
it's
we've
not.
gone through some of the questions of that were on page 2 that we had noted out. So should we start to talk about what do we need to do as the problems identified?
Yep.
You know, I think when it's first identified, you're scared, deer in the headlight, you're sort of
Absolutely.
paralyzed with what to do and who to tell, which could be a
Yeah.
whole nother topic for us, based on private information. And do people start looking at you differently? But I don't want to get off. So let's talk about what are the basic steps
Yep.
you need to do when you're first diagnosed or you know
Sure.
someone who is.
Yep. So if you are a person living with the disease, whatever disease that is, if you're living with dementia, or as a caregiver, the first thing you need to do is get basic information. Who are your caregivers that you can work with? Who's the team of family support or community support that you can count on? And a lot of this comes down to trust. So, or culture. The other big factor in this is culture. So some cultures, the adult son is the one, or the first adult, firstborn son is the one who makes all the decisions. In some cultures, it's the daughter or the oldest daughter or what have you. So a lot of these dynamics depend. So in our family, it's usually the oldest daughter, but in my personal family, the second one is a nurse practitioner. So my dad always lines up the three of us and says, "This is my retirement plan." He's got me, the gerontologist and counselor. He's got Debbie, who's a nurse practitioner. And then he's got Abby, who's the business person in the family, which is perfect because I don't want to manage their finances. So you want to kind of find out where are your support systems, informal support systems, the family support. Then you want to get information on the community, what we call the formal support systems. And that really depends on your long-term and short-term goals. So if your parent, spouse, what have you, wants to be able to live the rest of their life at home, that changes what I, as a coach or a counselor, might do to advise you. If you know you don't want to be a burden, like my mom and dad already have, unfortunately, separate nursing homes. Their favorite preferred nursing homes picked out. My mom's is up in Maine, right on the ocean, and she can't wait until someone is paid to keep her entertained, i.e. recreation therapy. Dad's actually not wanting to go to a nursing home at all. He's one of those old New Englanders in a pine box kind of thing. And really, he doesn't really care as long as he's in a comfortable chair with a clicker. Which he loses on a regular basis. So he leaves it on the table, just like that commercial where it's Velcroed to the table. It's not Velcroed, but it's almost always there. But knowing those long and short-term goals changes what kinds of services and supports you might want to access.
What if the
So it's
goal is to
important
stay
to know
at
those.
home,
Yeah.
but you can't do it? Can you
Mm.
do it?
Oh, you can. Depends a lot on a lot of different things. Unfortunately, I always tell my clients, it seems like it should be logical that your first step is to make sure you've got a family supporter.
Mhm.
Actually, your first step is legal and financial. Because if you have no money, or if you
Right,
have a lot of money, you can
mhm,
do pretty much whatever you need. It's those
right.
of us in the middle who have to figure things out. And it can get really messy and difficult. So that legal and financial planning, and this is, yes, you want to make sure you've got a power of attorney, durable health care agent, living will, those kinds of things you want to get in place with your legal things, but you also need to do the financial planning. So very early in this process, you want to meet with a good elder law attorney. There are a
Mhm.
ton of people out there who are elder law attorneys. I don't refer to all of them. Just in case you're watching this, I do have my preferred providers list, but anyone in the country, you can go on superlawyers.com. Superlawyers is a kind of clearinghouse where lawyers in the field endorse and recommend other lawyers. So if you're getting an elder law attorney from superlawyers.com, that means other lawyers respect the work that they do. So I like to refer people to that resource a lot.
And if I
Um,
can interject for
yeah,
a second, Pam, I just want to say we all have our own personal lawyers, and you may go to your personal lawyer who can do your will, and he does a little bit of employment law, and you just trust him and you've known him. It doesn't mean he knows how to do estates,
that's
probate.
right.
He's not dealing with those conservation issues on a daily basis. So
Yep,
I can't stress enough how important it is to find a firm that specializes in senior law.
absolutely. And they're not cheap, but it
No, but it's
will
worth
be
it.
the best investment that you will
Yes,
make in your entire life to
absolutely.
work with a good elder law attorney. Now, there are some attorneys that will say, oh, well, for $35,000, I guarantee we'll get you on Medicaid. That's a little steep. You can get a good attorney for much, much less money than that. It is a process to go through all the finances. There are look back periods.
Mm,
There are things that, like, for instance, in tax law, you can gift $15,000 per person per year without any tax implications to that person. But that does not have any impact on your financial planning for long-term care, because the state looks back several years and you may be ineligible for supportive services for X number of months. And again, you need to work with an attorney to figure all of that out. So just because your financial planner or your tax accountant can tell you something doesn't mean it's the same as an elder law attorney.
that's
So
right.
you really, and even if you're not elderly, it's just, it's a field because it's most often long-term care for elders that they're working with, because it's Medicare, Medicaid, all of those kinds of things. What else do we want to cover here, Mad?
Well, we've gone through, unless there's other questions about legal, I'd like to start to
Mm-hmm.
talk about family conversations. I,
Yep,
I
yep,
think
yep.
this is where it gets dicey, tricky. Um,
Yeah,
I happen to be extraordinarily lucky in that my brother and I are very close. We decide things together.
yep.
We don't argue. That is not the norm, is what I know. And
Mm,
so when do you start telling people?
yep, yep, yep.
What if some kids live far away, some kids live close?
Yeah.
What about family members who aren't always nice, quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly,
Yep,
or that they just don't get along? This is going to exacerbate
absolutely.
all of those stresses,
It
and
makes it
that's the
tough
last thing
sometimes.
you need, because the person going through this may not be remembering, but boy, they can still sense tension,
Right,
right? No
right.
matter what's happening, you
Absolutely.
still know when your kids are upset or your wife
Absolutely.
or your
No
spouse.
doubt about it. Or
So
when
how
those
do
family dynamics are difficult. So,
right.
first thing is to remember that we don't want to take away the dignity or the rights of the person living with the disease. That said, sometimes if they are in denial, they may not have the insight to know when they need help. And there is a point in the disease, middle stage, where they really don't know that they need extra help. For instance, jumping ahead, they may get to the point where they don't remember that they haven't showered. And in their minds, they already have, because they can't remember the last time they showered, but they know that they're adults and they've never needed another adult to tell them when it's time to shower. So they'll say, well, of course I showered. I shower every morning. And you're thinking, okay, but you put on your old clothes again or something like that. Those are topics for future shows. Having family conversations in the earliest possible time is helpful, depending on those family dynamics. I've had people in support groups say, I'm an only child with 6 siblings. Happens a lot. Or they'll say, I'm now a new caregiver because even though my loved one lives in Massachusetts, the person who lives in Massachusetts had a breakdown or has a new baby or has, some other life circumstance where caregiving is not necessarily an option for them based on the individual's needs. And in the very early stages, you don't need a whole lot of caregiving support. In our family's situation, it started with just mowing the lawn. And then it was mowing the lawn and paying the bills or taxes. Then it was mowing the lawn, paying the taxes and paying the bills. And then it was finding the bills because my grandmother kept hiding them because she couldn't find them when we showed up on Sunday to pay them. So it's something that generally gradually increases, unless it's vascular dementia, because if it's a stroke, it can have a more sudden change, but generally sudden changes, it's not a progressive dementia. All right, what was I saying? Family conversations.
Yes.
If the person is still working, you may want to consult with a coach to find out how to have conversations, because the employment law is very specific, but smaller organizations may not have the right kind of human resources support and know how to handle that. And we want to avoid lawsuits and stress from lawsuits if we can, if at all possible. But a coach can kind of help talk you through those options. Trying to think of what else. Other family conversations. You really want to be careful with what you share with other folks if there is any risk of exploitation. So if you've got someone who is, I don't know, someone who is an active substance user in the family, that person may be more likely to try to scam grandpa out of some of his resources, and grandpa's judgment is changing, or he's always been really generous, what have you, and doesn't understand what giving Jimmy, a whole bunch of money might mean for that person's, for the patient's future. So you do need to have those kinds of conversations. And again, the earlier you're planning, the more you're communicating, then you can plan who's going to handle what.
What about the sibling who lives away and denies it? Nope, sorry, mom's fine. Every time I call
and it
her,
happens that way.
She's cooking.
And as soon as someone comes in from out of state, all of a sudden mom's fine. Exactly. Mom's performing to the test, And part of that is because the brain loves novelty. And so it will come to a point, and it happens every single family that I deal with, where at some point mom's not going to be able to cover it up as much, and that sibling will see what you're talking about. A lot of times it happened during COVID. I'm sorry?
And owe her siblings an apology.
Yeah, which will never come. A lot of families during COVID, it really uncovered because so-and-so had to stay with dad or mom, or, then they understood what the spouse or the other parent was talking about.
Very true.
So, and those can be tough conversations. I facilitate a lot with my clients, those conversations, because then we can have it's a Zoom call. I think I mentioned I've got a client in Florida, and she's got, one son lives in Idaho, the other lives in California. We can all get on the call at the same time and answer everybody's questions all at the same time. And we can all hear what we're all saying at once.
That's great.
Mhm.
I think looking at the clock, we should probably move forward to safety.
Yep. Yes.
Since this first show is really, as you can see, an overview. On subsequent shows, we're going to go into more detail about specific topics.
Yep.
But let's talk about the 5 keys of safety, the risks, and
Yep.
what you see, and then we can go
Yeah.
from there.
Sure. So some of the biggest, especially in the early stages, driving is a huge safety issue. There are some really excellent tools offered by the Hartford, the insurance company. They partnered with MIT. And if you go to thehartford.com and in their search engine, put in dementia and driving. They've got workbooks, they've got worksheets, they've got how to have difficult conversations. It's the resource that I refer people to the most often.
Because
On you,
physicians won't
yeah,
take the keys away, correct?
correct. In every state except California, if you have a diagnosis, your keys are not automatically taken away. I'm not saying I agree with that personally. I think that we, especially here in Connecticut, um, can and should be doing a lot better. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of resources, and now we're getting even better with transportation options. But just taking away someone's license because they have a diagnosis, all that did in California was make people stop going to get a diagnosis. And that's not
Right.
a good, that doesn't help the
Mhm.
problem.
Do you think the increase in one-way crashes, I mean, in
Mhm.
Connecticut over the last year, though, is anyone doing any research if the one-way
Mhm.
crash is someone who's senior?
Yeah.
I'm just curious because dementia,
Yep.
perception
Yep.
issues, those
Yep.
signs are confusing.
They are.
One
They
way.
really are.
I'm
One
just
of the
curious.
things I know in Connecticut, especially, and in other states where we've recently legalized marijuana recreationally, they're trying to pin a lot of that to that. I don't know if that's true or not. We
Mm.
also have recently a lot of changes with regards to cell phone use. And
Yep.
so there's a lot of other distracted driving, if you will. There
Fair
was a
enough.
time before those things where I used to say, if I hear about a wrong way driver on the highway, I guarantee you it's an older adult with a cognitive impairment.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
just didn't happen. But yes, those signs are very, very confusing. And you don't always have good lighting or good
Right.
night. I don't want to say night vision, that's not, but vision for seeing driving at night. We do in Connecticut have a graduated license program. So, you may be able to blame the eyes, older eyes. That's a better reason for some people. They're more willing to give it up because of vision changes than cognitive changes, because they
Pam,
still know how to drive a car.
right.
Knowing how to operate a vehicle is very different than how to safely drive.
And react under pressure. We do have a
Exactly. Processing
question,
speed. Yeah.
if I can interrupt you on. The question is, how do you start talking to the patient and explaining to him and get him to understand that this is real?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, I like to have someone from the outside come in, whether it's the doctor, a nurse practitioner, a mental health counselor, or a coach.
Mhm.
By going to a specialist of some kind, then it's not the primary caregiver who's to blame. Then it's
Mm.
not the trusted doctor who's to blame. Or, if they, because I always worry that if a client is in denial, and the trusted doctor is trying to push the facts, then you risk them losing the trust or faith in that doctor. I would rather have people go to a dementia coach so that then they can ask questions. I'm very good at helping people have a conversation. And sometimes I start very generally with, I know so many people when they're aging, we all worry about those moments, those senior moments. How's your memory? How do you think your memory is? Oh, it's fine. We all have a little forgetfulness. Okay, well, that's good for you to know. Do you think it's worse than it used to be? And sometimes I'll ask very non-threatening things in conversations, just as a tip. I never, ever, ever ask why. I ask who, what, where, when, how, but why makes us naturally feel defensive. Dad, why did you do that? Dad, why didn't you call? Dad, why didn't, whatever it is. And I say
Mm,
dad all the time because I'm thinking about my dad. I never ask why, because then I feel like I have to justify my position versus
mm. That's
how
great.
how can I help you better? Or what can we do so that we can avoid those problems? Or what thoughts do you have about helping your memory? Or
It's
what would
almost like,
you like me to do to help you stay as independent as possible?
Pam, I think the things that you're saying, because I went through this with a family member recently who was frustrated because her sister couldn't remember something. And she said, but I know I told you, and we're going to have to agree to disagree. And I said to her, you just made her feel bad and
Yep,
defensive.
yep,
So but she didn't know the words. So,
yep.
maybe at some point a sheet that we can put out that has those wonderful phrases of
I have one. I have one, and I
that.
can send it because I have everybody's emails. I can
Right.
send you my basics of communication worksheet. So all of these safety things, and let me just review them real quickly here so that we can move on to the communication slide. Falls. Part of that is changes in proprioception, the understanding of where our body is in space, and part of it is changes in our useful field of view. Our vision and our proprioception changes with dementia. It's one of the other symptoms that's non-cognitive, okay? Challenges with wandering or getting lost in familiar spaces, problems with nutrition, and safe use of the stove. Also, problems with medication compliance and care accepting help, care compliance. Those are our big safety issues. So communication then is really important, because what we don't want to do is we don't want, and this is where we get the most majority of our behaviors, are when we make that person feel crazy or stupid. I always say people with cognitive impairments have two fears. They don't want to seem crazy and they don't want to sound stupid. Staying dignified and independent is all of our goal. All of
Exactly.
us. That's our, we all have those goals. Sorry. It's the heat. I'm going to blame the heat.
Yeah,
Um, I
I blame
make
your
more
food.
sense when I'm not overheated. But the communication, we can change how they react by changing how we react.
Mhm.
So communication changes increase their stress, their confusion, and their reaction to distress, whether they're hot, whether they're in pain, or whether they feel like they're being talked down to. So agree to disagree means that
Right.
I'm just vested in keeping my reality. Doesn't help the person with a cognitive disorder. All it does is erode the trust and create distress. So, as
Mhm.
caregivers, we have to learn to let go of that sometimes and just say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I forgot to tell you. Wow, I'm going to have to start leaving myself some notes. Mom, how do you always try to keep it together? You just use little yellow stickies. Did that help? And just start to gently change the focus of the conversation and say, Mom, you've taught me so many good things in life. I think my favorite lesson that you taught me was how not to blah, blah, blah. And then change it to the good things that mom taught you,
Mhm.
so that you're distracting from the stressful situation that's gotten you both inflamed and redirecting to something positive. We use in dementia care distract and redirect all the time. So we want to distract them from the stress and redirect them to something that's positive. Sometimes,
And not treat them like children.
and
Because
not treat them like
I
children.
because I hear distract and redirect, and my head went to a 3-year-old. And I think we have to be careful though, because I think you're right. We do distract, we do redirect, but it's gonna be in the context of respect, because these people have lived a life
Yep.
and
Yep.
you really can't take that away.
Absolutely. When we do a show on stages, one of the things that we talk about a lot is what we call a comparative developmental age. So developmentally, because of the cognitive disease losses, the person that I'm taking care of may have the cognitive abilities of an 8-year-old. but I
Mm,
should never treat them like an 8-year-old. I have to anticipate the anxiety. I have to anticipate their ability to know how to call 911, but not necessarily the judgment to know when to do it, or to get
mhm,
afraid when they hear a noise in the basement that they don't know what it is, or a
mhm,
shadow that they don't know what it's from. Okay.
mm.
But I don't ever want to treat them like children. So people who tell you you have to start parenting the parent, that's the wrong way to look at it. Yes, you can say they have a comparative developmental age of someone younger. That means we're going to use the approaches that we used when someone was younger, but we never want to call them and use our babyish voice or call them sweetie, honey, and dearie, which is so infantilizing. Um, we
You,
want to adapt and call them by their name and treat them like an adult because they are.
I remember, Pam, you said something to me 15 years ago now. You are never going to change the order. You're their
That's right.
children, they're your parents, and they
Right.
know that no matter what they remember.
That's right.
And that is such an important statement because I do
Yep.
think you do start to try to change the role because you're trying to
That's
get
right.
control. So
That's
now
right.
you want to be
And
the
because
parent.
you have to adapt your way of relating to them.
Right.
So, yes, you're in a parental style in that you have to help them get dressed or you have to remind them
Mm,
when to shower. But if you treat them like a child, they're going to
right.
push back. That's
Like a
what
child.
it says here on the slide. Thinking of reactions as a way they communicate distress. So if they're starting to push
Mm,
back, they're telling you, I don't like how you're treating me. So,
and important to hear it.
yes. All
Absolutely.
right.
So should close family be the caregiver? Do you
Totally
lose the
depends.
you lose the relationship? You're not mom, you're a nurse and a
Yeah.
CNA now. You know,
Yeah,
where
it's hard. I've had clients who I had a client when I was in a working in a counseling center recently, hit the loss of his love of his life. It's both of their second marriage, 40-year marriage. They
mm,
are the closest people, best of friends. It's just too hard for him. It's not the kind of person he is to be a caregiver.
mm,
So he's now second to the conservator. The niece is the conservator, or maybe it was her daughter is the conservator. And the nursing home keeps calling him. And he's like, please stop calling me. And he's already died of a heart attack once and brought him back. And so he's like, I cannot handle this stress. So, no, I
mm.
don't always think that the primary caregiver should be the family or the closest family member. Every family is different, and we need to remember not to judge people. I
Right.
think that a lot of us, even those of us who work in the caring fields, I mean, I can remember being up on our dementia unit at Hebrew Home, and we would all be so judgy about, well, so and so comes here and spends all day every day with his wife. Why does he do that? Doesn't he have anything else to do? Or is he depressed? Or so and so never comes to visit their family. They've just abandoned them here. There's always a story there. I can remember one facility I was consulting with, we were putting up memory boxes next to the facility, the residents' bedroom doors. And the program director said to one of the families, how come you haven't come in and put some tchotchkes in your grandmother's box or your mother's box? And the family member looked at the program director and said, do you have any idea what it's like to be hit with a coat hanger?
Oh my
This sweet
God.
little old woman that we
Oh my
all knew as sweet Mrs. Smith was a very vicious mother.
God.
So, we really have to be careful not to judge pre-existing relationships. And those family dynamics, there's always a story there.
Mm,
So
wow, that's
we
a
do the
powerful.
best we can, right? Maya Angelou, we do the best we can with what we know. And when we know better, we do better.
Is there anything we should avoid communicating? Can you over communicate, say too
That's
much?
a really good question.
And
I'm
are
going
you
to
holding
say,
back if you don't say? you
as a
know?
general rule, no. However, if a person is living in a very negative space and
Mm,
is very emotionally frail, I have had times where we didn't tell them that a family member passed.
right.
That's a very case by case basis.
Mm,
Um, I can remember when I was working at Hebrew Home going head to head with the rabbi, who was insistent that we had to tell one of the residents that her son had died of a tragic overdose. And we knew no good was going to come to that. She was constantly worried about her son and perseverated on that a great deal. And he, obviously, because he was the ethics board and the rabbi, his view prevailed. And so we, as the team of caregivers on the unit, all had to be prepared with how to help her. And I got the rabbi to agree that we were only going to force this knowledge for a week, because he wanted us to constantly reorient her every time she asked that her son had passed.
Like reliving
and
the
what
trauma every day.
Exactly. So we let it go on for a week. And then we all had to have the same communication, a therapeutic fib, if you will, to say, oh, well, you know what? We're not sure what he's up to now, but we know that your cousin will call us if there are any problems. Okay, so we weren't,
because it's about the person.
Totally honest, but it's about the individual and their emotional stability.
Exactly. Person-centered care. We are coming
Yes.
down to the last 4 minutes. So
Oh
I
my
do want to
gosh.
encourage any of our attendees today, if you have any questions, to please put them in the chat. Or if you found this informative and you enjoyed it,
Any
please
feedback.
let us know any feedback.
So this last slide here is probably why you couldn't get the PowerPoint, Madeline. It's filled with pictures. This is a quality of life that we should be aiming for and is possible. Socialization, spirituality, and giving back to the community, pet therapy, Tai Chi, dancing, art therapy, meditation and mindfulness, and support. All of these things are key elements of a good quality of life. Even in a wheelchair, people can still dance and have and enjoy movement. We used to have an arts therapy program for many, many years. It was art therapy, dance and movement, and music therapy every week on our dementia unit and through our adult day program. And they still do a lot of these services in the adult day program at Hebrew Senior Care and in a lot of senior adult day programs. When I worked at an assisted living, I was executive director, we had people bring in 6 horses, not into the facility, to the parking lot. And you should have seen people's faces light up, those who like horses, because those of us who are horse lovers will always be horse lovers. The smell of the horse when you've been petting, on your hand, being able to curry comb or brush the mane, just seeing those great big beautiful eyes was such a fabulous experience. Having a cat on your lap, having a dog by your side.
So I'm going to interrupt because we have a question.
Yes.
What if a person has given up on life and doesn't do anything to help themselves?
Okay, great question. So 40% of people with dementia are also clinically depressed. This is what happened to Robin Williams. He had Lewy body dementia, and with that came a huge depression. It is very important to treat depression superimposed on dementia because it will make the dementia appear worse. So when I hear given up on life, that is not a typical trait of Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. It's very common and treatable. So it's very important that we get them some good counseling and support.
A chat from Mike. I just want to say, thank you for doing what you're doing with your wife. He is supporting her, she has been diagnosed with early onset at 57, and he's 52, and working, a lot to balance. So Mike, we are here for you. If you have questions, you can always reach out. Hebrew Senior Care offers a day center. If that would relieve stress, you can look into day center services, as well as contacting Pam as a coach or just to help you.
Or it may be too soon for adult day programs. There are lots of resources for the early stage folks. It's very regional though. So if people are watching this from other states, you know, you may not have as many resources. In Connecticut, we're very resource rich, which is wonderful. You just need to get the right connections and then facilitate the conversations. So I work with a lot of folks with young onset. Excuse me, both Madelene and I are both working with local organizations to start a new memory cafe. And the memory cafes are something that are now national and international. It actually started across the pond, actually, I think in Denmark, and great resources. So connect with us. We're happy to help you and support you. Young onset is tough. About 10% of the 6.5 million Americans with dementia, with Alzheimer's, are young onset. My cousin was 57 when she was diagnosed, and she came up to live with me for a month to learn how to live with Alzheimer's, and she did very well for several years. It's tough transitions though.
Absolutely.
And tough on the families.
Pam, as always, our hour goes by quickly. You're a
fast.
wealth of information. I hope that the participants have all enjoyed it in terms of just getting the education and the information that they need. And as you leave this show, I hope you leave knowing you're not alone, and that there are a lot of people out there dealing with this on a variety of levels. And we will be coming back with another show, and this will become more supportive as we move through this. So please, you have our emails. If you have a topic you want us to cover, or further questions tonight when you think, oh my God, I meant to ask that and I didn't, send us an email. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. So thank you for joining us, and wherever you are, stay safe and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Good to see you all. Those of you we know, good to see you. Hi, Zita.
So good to see you too. Oh my gosh. I'm definitely going to email. I want more and more conversation.
Good.
Absolutely. Memory
Okay,
cafe.
Whatever topics you want,
Yeah.
or you think we should offer, even if it's not something you're personally dealing with. I always say
Mary.
caregivers are the ones with the real expertise.
Exactly. You're the
Yeah.
one going through it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Oh, Mary Root, I miss you.
We miss you, Mary, so much.
All right. Bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody.
weekend.